I'm not telling you the way it is. This is where we're holding. Okay, there's a famous Gemara in the Dorm, the Baal Peh, it's easier for me. I wrote Shishlei is Kaimun in the Dorm, Gemara in the Dorm, the Chav Gimel on the base. I wrote Shishlei is Kaimun in the Dorm, a person wants to make sure that he doesn't, is in the Dorm, don't hold. What does he do? So the Lashon of the Gemara in Chav Gimel is, here. I wrote Shishlei is Kaimun in the Dorm of Kol Hashana, Yamoid b'Rosh Hashanah, v'yoymar kol neder shani osid lider yeh botel, u'bilvad sheyeh zocher b'shas haneder. So the Bible says no. The pshat bilvad shelo yeh zocher b'shas haneder. That's the halach. The halach is that you're moiser meidah. You stand in Rosh Hashanah, and you say any neder that I will make this year is botel mavutel. So we call them mesiris meidah. Saying lechatchila that the das that you will have then is deficient. Now, if you don't remember your meidah, then the das is taka, the net is not chal. That's why I never knew why people were so obsessed about nedarim, ataras nedarim. If you knew what you were saying at kol nidr, which once again maybe you didn't, but if you knew it's a possibility. Actually, I would say probability. But if you knew what you were saying on Yom Kippur at night, and you were moiser meidah, that any nedarim that I make during this year are null and void, and I'm sure that when you made the neder during the year, you didn't remember your kol nidra. How many people think about kol nidra often during the year, unless it's only like they start listening to the music, you know what I mean? So man, the neder is not chal anyway. That's the halach. I'm serious, the neder is not chal. Don't need a toast. Nedarim, you don't need a force. Don't need anything. It's gornish with weiter gornish. Okay, just want this to be clear on the table. You didn't even say over there a chutz min nidra tainus b'shas mincha or anything like that. So Adra, if you want to make a neder of kavodas tainus, then you should take and remember your kol nidra for the neder to be chal. Because if you don't make the neder of kol nidra for the takinat chal. Okay, nafkaminas for the mishaberachs that you make. Not going into that. I don't want to tell the gaboim what the truth is. That you remind people kol nidra. But that's the halacha. And that's why we say kol nidra. The obvious question on the table is to anybody, it seems to be the Jews are around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are obsessed with Nedarim. It's not an obsession. I mean, what do you do during the Zoom, without the Zoom, Mita Shliach, Chana Shliach, all these funny questions that people develop Nedarim, so they ask these questions. But at the end of the day, what's the obsession with Nedarim? This is the ceremonial, the entree to Yom Kippurim. Kol Nidre, we think it's the most auspicious thing that people go buy tickets to go to Kol Nidre. What is it? It's nothing more than a Mesiris Meidah. Whatever vows I will make in the following year are null and void. Very nice. What's the Geschäft? Why is this a Psichet Yom Kippur? Why is this so important? What is obsession? You're choishish for the Aver of Nedarim. Let me tell you, let's not think about Lashon Hara, Rechilas, B'tul Torah, I don't know what. There's so many other Avers that we do, much more than Yisur and Nedarim. And Punkt Isser Neder, you're choishish Nebach on Nedarim. That's your only problem. You must be the holiest guy on earth. Okay, this is your problem. Maybe you made a vow and you didn't fulfill it. Believe me, if you're that holy, you probably fulfilled the vow. You know what I mean? Because if you're that holy, you learned Masechtas Nedarim. So you know Hilchos Nedarim, so you know what to do. If you didn't finish Hilchos Nedarim, you don't know you're not holy. It's a double pashut. I'm for you Mishnah Pirkei Avos Lam Arz Choset. So Mele Kumtais, it's a pelatzum. What is this obsession with Nedarim which is shaykh to Yom Adin and to Yom Kippur? It's hakapella. It probably bothers many people. The next question on the table is that L'chari, the Gemara is Madnik. The Gemara says that Reitzah Shal Yiskaimu the Chasa and Nedar of what she Yamid B'Rosh Hashanah. He starts at the beginning of the year. Why B'Rosh Hashanah? It's a Psabdin in Rosh Hashanah. It means to say L'chari. What does it mean? It means to say you're talking about the year. So the beginning of the year, make sure it doesn't happen. So is there a shame? Why is it Dafke Tolu in the? There's two. What does Rosh Hashanah mean? The Ramban discusses at length that there are two ways we count. Mibriya Sa'olam, we take account from Tishrei. But our months we count is, we know Yetzias Mitzrayim, we count from Nisan. So why did you decide that the Nedorim year is from Rosh Hashanah? What's up, Sanaya Lachada? Is it Dafka Rosh Hashanah? It means that any time when as soon as you're aware that you're afraid that Nedorim will be a problem, you make a Meidah. The third issue is an issue that the Rishonim asked. The Rav Yah already brings that the minig is therefore we say Kol Nidre. And the Iker Kol Nidre is not HaTorah Nedorim, the way some people say, Miyom Kippurim Shavar, Ad Yom Kippurim Zeh, but rather Miyom Kippurim Zeh, Ad Yom Kippurim Abba Leinu L'Tayva. That's the Mesiris Meidah. The other din of Miyom Kippurim Shavar, Ad Yom Kippurim Zeh is very problematic, because that's HaTorah Nedorim. For HaTorah Nedorim, you have to say it in front of three. And here, who are the three you're saying in front of the two fogies with the Sefer Torah and the Chazan? And they're not even looking at you. You're not looking at them. And you have to refer to Sanhedrin. You have to ask, you're not doing anything. What the getter of that part of Yom Kippurim Shabbat, Yom Kippurim say, it's a mini fun in the Rav Yah, mini Ashkenaz to say that. Some people do, some people don't, whatever it be. But that's not the Iker Kol Nidra. The Iker Kol Nidra is this Gemara, which is the Mesiris Meidah, which is Yom Kippurim Zad, Yom Kippurim Abba Leinu L'Tayva. Fetzach de Kasha, was hat sie Yom Kippur? Steht doch in Gemara Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara says Rosh Hashanah. Why are you doing it Yom Kippur? Now, B'chal doesn't make sense. Why are you calling this Rosh Hashanah? The emes is, the Gemara says that anything that happens to you, any bad thing that happens in the world, including this drastic rise in infection rate in Israel. I think we had almost 7,000 people infected yesterday. It has to do with last year's Mishpat. The Mishpat, which the Einshim or whatever Mikrim that happened during the year, that accounting starts from after Yom Kippur. The Maisa, practically speaking, it starts from Sukkot. But Lamaisa, as far as the calendar year of the auditing, Lamaisa, the Yonshim come only after Yom Kippur. After Yom Kippur, that's for this Rosh Hashanah. But everything during these 10 days is still shy to the year before. So Gemara in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, all the mikrim that happen in the Sadash, things that happen, the place infection, the infecting, the insects, whatever it be, this is all last year's cheshbon. The cheshbon continues for the 10 years. So it means to say, as far as cheshbonis is concerned, as far as practical reality, when is the practical year? We have a new accounting. The accounting year is Motzei Yom Kippur. Or the Yom Kippur, Motzei Yom Kippur. But the 10 days are still part of the previous year. As they state in Fush and Gemara, at the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. So what does the Nedorim have to do with that? That's the only thing I have in Gemara. And our minig somehow tells us we start with Yom Kippur and not with Rosh Hashanah. Mistomah has to do with that Gemara, but how, why, what? And that's question number one. Well, the answer to that is quite simple. And the Chanami, the Agoyes Maimonides writes in the end of Hilchos Shvisus Aser, in the end of Hilchos Shvisus Aser, the halachas of Yom Kippurim, at the back the Teshuvos of the Agoyes Maimonides, and there he asks this question. And he says as follows. Kol nidre hinig ravon v'shar kadmoinig del ashkaz leimer miyom kippurim she'ova yom kippurim zeh u'mati by nidom sheshana she'ovra. And he explains why. Finally, he says afterwards, Rabbeinu Tam argued and said you should only say Yom Kippur zeh Yom Kippur lein l'toiva. Then he asked the question, "Ba'al tashiv im kein hoya lasos b'Rosh Hashanah." We should have done this on Rosh Hashanah. Why are we doing it on Yom Kippur? So what does he answer? The Ashkelon, because we found a pasuk in Navi, the Yom Kippurim Nami Ikr Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is all, Yom Kippur is also called Rosh Hashanah. As the pasuk says in Yecheskel and Perik Mem, Be'esim v'chomish shana legaluseinu, B'Rosh Hashanah ba'asor lachodesh. It says Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the head of the year, and the 10th of the month. So what's the head of the year? Ezer Rosh Hashanah Shabasor LaChaydesh Evayim Yom Kippurim. V'chein na'ag Maram, this is also the minig, this is what Maram Rutenberg did. He said this Kol Nidra in Yom Kippur. That's how it starts. It's sometimes the Balei HaTosfos. But the problem, and there he also writes, Yom Kippur she'avar ein ela toya, she'ef shelahati la'atzon b'lecharota, etc. Most Rishonim think the same Yom Kippur she'avar, Yom Kippur is a waste of breath. I just want you to, I don't know what, you continue doing what your minig is, okay? I know what I do. I know what my father did. If you stay da, you only moister my da. We don't do it. First of all, you already did that Tosh Nedorm, Rosh Hashanah. What do you have to do it again for? Stam Reden. I mean, no mitzvah to talk. Okay, this is what you're doing now. Actually, the funny thing is you were moister my da already also at Rosh Hashanah. So you were Mekayim the Gemara already. So why are you saying Kol Nidra? Well, why not? You can't actually drink then. So you might as well, and the chazan has to get paid for something. Vas meinta. So it's interesting. I repeat, this is an obsession of Nedarim. What are you afraid of the Nedarim you made from Rosh Hashanah bis Yom Kippur? Abruch tzemir. How many people are making Nedarim? I don't even. How many people make a neder that's really a neder? I'm not saying I promise. Garnished. These are all things which most people think they're making Nedarim. They don't know what they're doing. There is no, they're not making Nedarim. But was tut sich doch? So he says, Naniach, that Yom Kippur is also called Rosh Hashanah. Why Yom Kippur? Rosh Hashanah is also called Rosh Hashanah. I said that in Rosh Hashanah, I said, people don't eat nuts because ego is gematria chet. So the Kotzke said, but chet is also be gematria chet. Like, remember that one. Like, try not doing that. That's more important. Chet is gematria chet. It's the same chesed salad. You understand? Verstehen nicht. Was tut sie da? It's very nice that Yom Kippur is Rosh Hashanah, but Rosh Hashanah, the Chaychet Rosh Hashanah. It's a total period of time. It starts from Rosh Hashanah literally to Yom Kippur. It's called Rosh Hashanah, the end of the year. Now we have to understand why it's called the end of the year. And obviously the culmination of that period is Yom Kippur. And somehow it's appropriate dafka on Yom Kippur. Let's try to understand why. Why is it appropriate dafka? In other words, this Hatoras Nedarim, or this Mesiras Medah, has to do with what? With the Avodah Sayom Aser Shemei Teshuva. That's what it boils down to be. Because Aser Shemei Teshuva, they are Rosh Hashanah, and they would say the peak of Aser Shemei Teshuva is Yom Kippur. And Ein Chanami, the Ran Take writes, there's a machlokes at Tanoim. When was the world created? Rav Blachman and Rav Yeshua. Rav Blachman believes the world was created in Tishrei. The Gemara says that's why we say Hayom Haras Olam Hayom Yamid B'Mishpat Kol Yitzur Yolamim. This is the holiday of the impregnation of the world. This was the world was, so to speak, came into being. Why? Because Adam was created on that day. And obviously this justifies the creation. That's why there's a mishpat. I'll explain in a few minutes why that's a reason. So the Gemara says this goes according to Rav Blachman, which says that the world was created in Tishrei. The Mashmos of the Gemara Stam is that I'll leave it to Rabbi Yeshua, we shouldn't be saying it. But Lamaisa, the Rishonim don't learn that way. They understand that there's a different reason of saying Hayom Haras Olam, which I don't think I want to explain at the moment. But the Rishonim ask, but at the end of the day, why do we make? Why is there a Yom Adin today? Bishleim, if it's a Yom Haras Olam, for whatever reason, there's an aniach, there's a mishpat. Birthdays are times for assessing things. Okay, I can relate to that. But if the Exodus from Egypt, like why exactly do we have a mishpat then when it's first of all Chodesh and we left Tesvav and was Tutzavda? But Nisan Nivra Olam, why are we making anything on this Akasha the Rishon? The Maisa, the Ramban says two things. And the Ran basically elaborates on one. The Ramban says, first of all, it's the Chodesh which has in it Yom Kippur. And the Ran explained that since this is a day, a month which has in it Kapara, therefore it's appropriate that Kodesh Baruch Hu will make a din at in that month in order that he should have a clear assessment of reality, and people will do tshuva, he should be able to do kapara. So the whole mishpat is for you to recognize what you're deficient in. Zot the Ran, the only reason Kadosh Baruch Hu is Yoshev and Kisei Mishpat Rosh Hashanah for the Jew to make his own Cheshbon HaNefesh. Derech Agav, I saw this very nice piece of paper that Rabbi Davidson wrote, a guide to Cheshbon, very nice, I must say, very impressive. I think everyone should read it. It's very nice. But there's deeper Cheshbon HaNefesh than that. This is being nice. He's a very nice person, so Cheshbon HaNefesh means something much, much deeper. It means, you have to actually open your Pandora's box and look into the cesspool. A very not pleasant thing to do, and could be psychologically very disheveling. You can be you can flip, and I'm not talking about that today. I should, but some other time. How is this done to keep mental balance? Real introspection, really looking into the cesspool without fainting or going into denial, which most of us do. We choose not to open up the can of worms, because if we look at it, we'll be totally destroying our sense of self and our sense of ego, and then we will either, our wiring will go nuts, or we just decide not to go. We'll use words to make it feel ourselves as if we did, but we didn't. Rav Blachman talks about this, actually. Rav Blachman Mamish talks about how to make sure that you can do this successfully, but this is not what I'm going to talk about tonight. It's another topic. How does one actually be honest and look with two good eyes into your cesspool? And there's a lot of worms. Because that's the idea of the Mishpat of Rosh Hashanah. The Mishpat of Rosh Hashanah is for you to look into your own Mishpat, ultimately realize your deficiency, and then do Teshuva, then a Kosh Baruch Hu, Mechaper on Yom Kippur. That's what the Ran writes, Bar Chava. He actually says afterwards, he continues, V'yitachen, so the Ran, that the Ritzui of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Egel actually started on Rosh Chodesh and continued and finally came into fruition on 10 days later on Yom Kippur. Where's this coming from? He says, where's this coming from? The Ran, everything's Yitachin. Yitachin also that my mother had wheels and she had a bus service to Haifa. Ich verstehe. What's meant Yitachin? You don't have the Gemara in front of you, but if you see the Gemara, it's Achim God. The Teretz says, because anybody who learns the Drush is the Ran after they writes, it's the Rosh HaChodesh, which has the Teshuva, then he has another V'hu B'Rosh HaChodesh. What does that mean? Well, everybody who davens know that Rosh Chodesh is a Yom Kippur. It's also a Yom Din. Every Rosh Chodesh is a Yom Din. That's why we have Sarah Lechatos. You daven Musaf. So there's a Sarah Lechatos. Rosh Chodesh is a Sarah Lechatos. There's a Yom Din and a Yom Kippur. If you said Musaf, Zman Kippur l'chol tedosim b'yismin v'yu v'nechas sirish v'chaver ba'adom. So Yom Kippur. The Chiddush is that this Rosh Chodesh of Tishrei, since of the Rosh Chodesh of the Chodesh, which has Yom Kippur in it, it's a super Yom Din. Because Yom Kippur takes into account the Chatoim of the whole year, in the bigger picture, Kimavur Baramam, that's an Eis Miyuchad L'Tshuva, L'Ficha Chai Bodom, Lashav Az B'Tshuva and Perik Beis. So this is a super Rosh Chodesh. So that's why the Mishpat is on Rosh Chodesh. Like every Rosh Chodesh is a Mishpat. Here there's a big Mishpat. Because this is the Chodesh which has the Yom Kippur. So basically it all starts because there's a Yom Kippur. And the Maisa, why is there Rosh Hashanah? Because the Rosh Chodesh of the Chodesh which has in it Yom Kippur. That's before the Ran and the Ramban and the Drasha. And that's the Makkah of the Ramban, when the Ramban says, V'yitachin, that the Ritzui, that the Kosh Baruch Hu wanted to be Mechaper the Jews in Yom Kippur, started from Rosh Chodesh. It's a davar pashut, because Rosh Chodesh is the beginning of Zman Kapora. Every Rosh Chodesh is Zman Kapora. And the Rosh Chodesh of Yom Kippur also has a Rosh Chodesh which is Zman Kapora. So the Kapora started then and went until and finished on Yom Kippur. That's the Lashon of the Ran over there. I think it's in the Izvahadid Avches in the Rif. Now, important, I think once again we have to get used to learning things from the primary sources of Gemaras and Rishonim. You don't jump to a Bnei Yisachar and Hashem Mishmul, or whatever, or Likutei Amorim, whatever books they are. That's the Aleph base of anything. Okay, das versteht dort. So once again, we see there's a unit of time called Rosh Hashanah B'Yom. This is Aser Shemei Teshuva. Tchilas HaRitzui, V'Sof HaRitzui. The din is there because of the Ritzui. It's one unit of time. One would like to understand exactly where this is coming from and exactly what is this halacha of Nedarim in that period of time. There's another thing which is unique for Aser Shemei Teshuva, and that's an interesting halacha in Shulchan Aruch. But now, once again, how it's been translated through Rabbi Seinu Achronim, I don't take achrayus. I'm going to read the text inside. Yeah. Okay. Tough Zayin. Tough Reish Gimel. So here the Torah quotes a Yerushalmi. Reb Chia mafkid leRav. Reb Chia commanded Rav, Iyat yachol lemechol kul shaita v'tayra. If you eat even your chulin with Taira, what we call chulin b'Tairis HaKodesh. It's not a din, it's not a chumrah. It's like relate to everything as if it's karbanis, or as if it's a truma. And it isn't. It almost looks like he's living in La La Land, but that's what he tells him to do. You should be tried to be makbid to read everything b'Taira. The obvious question to anybody: why? And think is it? What's the idea? Why? Why should I eat b'Taira? I'm not going to the Mikdash. I can eat chulin b'tumah. There's no halachic issue at all at any level. It's a psamaila. So Rav Chia teaches that it's a maila for a person like Rav to eat chulin as if it's kodesh, and should be sensitive to the din of kodesh even in chulin. And one has to try to understand what's the maila. If you can't eat it all year, there's at least 1 week a year that you should eat chulin b'Tairis HaKodesh. Echayel shiva yamim b'shaita. 7 days a year you should eat chulin b'Tairis HaKodesh. Which 7 days? Because of Avi Ezri. Okay, this is the Ravya. Nibale HaTaisfus. Hibalti. That's a word which I like to see. I have it in my tradition. You have to understand his grandfather was the Papukta of Rabbeinu Tam, the Ravan, G'dayli Chachmei Ashkenaz. Eilem Shiva Yomim Shebein Rosh Hashanah LeYom Kippur. These are the 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Ad Kan. Period. Ad Kan he brings from the Ravan. And then he says, V'kaira Oysa Shmoyne Shivas Yomim. So why do they call it 7 days? L'fisha b'Rosh Hashanah lo yatzorich lazhirei lechol b'Taira. Kipshita, that every person should be makbid to eat chulin b'Tairis HaKodesh on Rosh Hashanah. Did you know that? It's pshita. Why is it pshita? Shepshita sheicha b'Taira shari chayav adam l'Taira atzim b'regel. I go to Chiddush state da. There's a din of chayav adam l'Taira atzim b'regel, and we're talking about bisman hu. We're talking about bisman balei ha'taisvus. Equals although you're going to continue being a tamei mes because there's no efer para aduma. There's a mitzvah and a chiyuv before Yom to make yourself as Torah as possible. All of us. Whatever tumah is possible to be mitayah with ruchach chashod b'mayim v'chulu and the erev shemesh, not just talking about tefillas Ezra and Keri, but even any other tumas which hypothetically all you had to have was mikvah and erev shemesh, we should do before Rosh Hashanah for every regel. Did you know that? No, now you do. Because chayiv adam ta'as meregel. That's why an isha neither should be makbid if she can't be toivel definitely before Yom Tov. Because chayiv adam ta'as meregel, she also is mechuyiv al pidin to be as Torah as possible. And what's this idea of being as Torah as possible if we're going to be a Tamah Meis anyway? What is this idea? So even though you're going to be a Tamei Meis, we're talking about Rav. Bisman Rav, there already was no Pura Aduma. You try your best to eat b'Taira as much as you can. Ich bin Tome. Ki'ilu. Ich bin doch Tome. And this is the Chulin. Ki'ilu. What is this? It's like a comedy. So he says, make sure before Yom Tov to go to the mikveh, and obviously then you're going to be eating Chulin B'Tairis HaKodesh as much as possible. It says Rosh Hashanah, it's a B'yisa B'Kutcha, so you obviously all went to the mikveh. Okay, not just Tisha Kavim because of Tfilas Ezra, because you're Choshish for Tumas Nevela, whatever it only be, you must have, whatever it only be, not going into it. Mustama, when you learn Chanina's going to you learn a little bit about understanding what Tumah B'Tayr is, at least you'll know something about it. It's enough Gemina La'alacha Gemurah for every year of Yom Tov. So what's left? If 2 days of Yom Tov you basically were, 2 days of says Teshuva, you ate already Chum B'Tayr Sakosh. No, I don't think on Yom Kippur anybody eats. So you only have 7 days, which had to be mechadish. Make sure that those 7 days you're taught. And those are the 7 days that he told him. Now the question is, no Allah is Batas Yerushalmi, no, without a Chaylik, a Ravya, and a Ravan, that we're supposed to be makbid on Chulin B'Tairis HaKodesh in Aser Shemei Teshuva. Tell me why. Doch steht weiter. Now they extrapolated. Remember, before I go further, Chulin B'Tairis HaKodesh is not a chumrah. It's not a frumkeit. If anything, it don't make sense. It's like you're living in it's as if it is. It reminds me when I was a little kid, I used to put like boxes on my head with my dad's belt. It felt like I was putting on tefillin. You know what I mean? That's what it looks like. Chulin B'Tairis HaKodesh. B'shtachat I'm a mess. And this is not Torah. This is Afal PK. And from there, what do they extrapolate from that? They accept from the halach she'af mishein nizur b'pas shel goyim b'chol hashana. What happened over there? Let's understand what this din is. The halacha was etc. The chatchila, because the Rabbanim were very sensitive to us socializing with and fraternizing with the Gentiles. And if you go together to a restaurant, to a kosher restaurant, a veggie restaurant, whatever they call, whatever these restaurants which naniach it's kosher, but the baked things, it's bishul akum, it's yain akum, and it's lechem akum. We're afraid you're going to fraternize, and bishum b'nei seim, you become friendly with their daughters, and we're afraid of assimilation. So that's why they asked it stam yaina. It's not yain nesach. They asked it stam yainam of a guy. Why? Bishum b'nei seim. That's why you don't go to a bar with a guy. So at the time they didn't have whiskey and rye, so they only had wine. But Lamais is the same idea. The idea is you don't fraternize. Okay, that is through obviously the 2 major components of a meal in Babylonian Talmud were wine, as we know, X amount of cups are drank in every meal, and lechem. That's why there's a special birchas hamazon on lechem, because it's missing the thikar kaveh of the Suda. Okay, so that's why lechem and liyayin were asher mishum b'nei seim. Then they realized at the time, I don't know if you're aware of it, but it was a big spiel to get a government license to be able to bake, have an oven for baking. Okay, we're going back then, Bisman HaTalmud. So they decided that, it's Chaya Nefesh. They won't be able to have bread. You're only going to have Jewish bread. No one's going to have bread, and it's a problem. They said, it's Exeir Shena Yechot Yechol Lamed Boy. And they rescinded. They said, no, not this. We won't do this. What we'll do, but you can have private bread of a goy, boutique bread. You can't have boutique bread, but you can have, so to speak, general bakery bread, if it's kosher. If that's made by a goy, it's called paspalter, the bread of a baker. You can't go to a boutique family store. Just want to put this on the table right now. So I don't know if you ever, just after a certain halachas, people forget. Okay? In other words, if you happen to go to a French friend and he wants to tell you his homemade baguette, you can't eat it. It's usher. Okay? Okay, but you can go to a regular place to buy a regular baguette, because that's more, if you know how baguettes are made, the real baguettes, that's what they messed up afterwards, I don't know. That's the taka kosher. Okay, that's why you all eat the baguette. Okay? I had to know these things, when I was in France. So at the end of the day, this is mutter. Paspalter is mutter. It was never nesa. It's not a chumrah. To be machmer on it, what do you be mach for? The Chazal never said it's usher. You're choshish to a havamina of the Gemara. Let me tell you, if you want to be choshish for a havaminas, your life will be miserable. Okay? You understand? So what are we doing here? So we say, yeah, in Aseres Tshuva, you should be choishish to pas palter. What's this? Does this make sense? Is this frumkeit? It's not frumkeit. It's narishkeit. You're choishish to a tzad that the Gemara thought it was going to do, then figured it can't do because it's not going to happen. What's it does? I mean, it's a little better than Chulin B'Teres HaKodesh. Because that B'chal doesn't make sense. So we're extrapolating from Chulin B'Teres HaKodesh, Din Mishen and Nizr, B'Pashal Goyim B'Chol HaShonah, B'Aseres Tshuva and Nizr. This is not Chumrus. This is not being more frum. This is not frumkeit. This, I don't know what this is. The Chayadam thinks it's frumkeit. The Chayadam writes, therefore we should be makbid more on mitzvahs, or whatever, we choishish for deis and rishonim more, we should be frummer on Aseres Tshuva. It's not the correct read of the Torah. They didn't say to be frumer. They told you to do things which are out of the ball. They're not frumkeit. What they are, I don't know. We have to figure out. But it's not frumkeit. You're not being machmer in anything. You shouldn't be choishish. Don't be frumered now than you're for the whole year. God doesn't need your games. Oh, Rab, God, I'm going to be frum for a week. You know, what do you think? He's senile. If he's senile, he's not worth talking to. It's not this. We have to understand what this is, because this taka makes no sense. What halacha is this chum b'teres hakodesh and pas palter? What's it got to do with Aseres Tshuva? That's the tzorchi and gadol. But this is so far we understand Aseres Tshuva is epis avoda of nedarim, and Aseres Tshuva is epis halacha in pas palter and chum b'teres hakodesh. Those are the questions on the table. There's one more thing in Aseres Tshuva which is brought down in Lashon HaRambam. Where the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva, Perik Beis, Halacha Vav, Afa Picha Tshuva V'Tzalka. Tzalka, we're talking about what? But the tzalka for kapara, it doesn't mean tefillah. That's not the lashon you use for stam tefillah. You don't call it tzalka. Tzalka is usually a tzalka used in lashon Rambam bisman tzora. Okay, and here it means the tzora of chait. Ava pisha tshuva v'tzalka. The tzalka, which you normally about tshuva, should be tzayik. Yafa la'olam. It's always good to repent and to pray for repentance. B'aseres hayamish ben Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim. In these 10 days, which start with Rosh Hashanah and end with Yom Kippur, he yafa b'yaiser. What's b'yafa b'yaiser? Umiyad hi miskabelas. It gets received, the prayer gets an answer immediately. Shneimar, Yeshua Hashem b'yimotzai, seek God when He is available. Kra'u, call out to Him, b'yoto karov, when He is close. This is a zman which is miyucha, which your tefillah, not that your tefillah is nena or not nena. The kunz is it's nena miyad. So obviously the question is whether it's nena or not nena. The chiddush here is that it's nena miyad. That's what the Rambam says. Yafa b'yaiser umiyad hi miskabelas. I want to know what's the miyak of the whole year that's not miskabel miyad. Why does it take more time? What's the procrastination in tefillah of kabbalas at tefillah during the year, which is not found in Aseres Tshuva because the dir Hashem b'matzei karo b'yosei. What's mi'akiv in our tefillos for tshuva? And we're talking about not tefillah for the stock market. Obviously, tzalka. We're talking about the tefillah for tshuva. I'm asking God, please help. Slachnon hashivenu. You say hashivenu, and this is Aseres Tshuva. It actually works faster. And if you're royal lakach, you're going to get a Siyata D'Shmaya immediately. And if you don't get a Siyata D'Shmaya immediately, the answer was no. You got a fast answer. No. It's also a fast answer. The chiddush is you get a fast answer. That if there's a yes, it's an immediate yes. And Baruch Hashem, many people feel that the feel of Aseres Tshuva, it gives Siyata D'Shmaya and a certain, a kick to do it and to really change and grow. But the shaila on the table is, what's the mi'akiv all year? After Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't work as fast as it works in the Seder Meishu. What is this? It seems to me, if I sum it up, what I have here are these three nekudas of Asher Meishuva. A, an obsession with Nedarim. B, Chulim B'Taras HaKodesh and Paspalter, which does not mean from Kat. And C, three, the idea of Eskabel Tfilas Mekabel Miyad. These three nekudos somehow have to do with the nature of this period of time, and the question is, what does this mean? That's the question on the table. Okay, let's start with Aleph Beis. L'maaseh, the Ramban Paschal's taked that the halacha is the B'tishrei Nivra Olam. The Machlekes Reb Elazar Reb Yeshua. The Ramban himself in the drasha writes that la halacha we paskin that the B'tishrei Nivra Olam. So l'maaseh, what's the reason of the mishpat outside of because Rosh Chodesh, but uniquely because Hayom Haras Olam, Hayom Yav B'Mishvat Kol Yitzurei Olamim. Now, what does that mean? Let's understand this carefully. What is the idea of this idea of what's the mishpat of Adam? So I have to be mekatzev v'mokum shetzorich laharich, but en b'reira, because there's a lot of questions to deal with. It means as follows. Obviously, we understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu built this world, or the whole creation, as Yeshayahu Hanavi writes, and you read it in the Haftarah. Shekol hanikar b'shmi lichvoidi barosiv yatzartiv afasisiv. All called out by my name, as I said, let there be X, let there be Y. All this was done l'chvoidi, barasiv, yatzartiv, afasisis. The whole bria, yitzira, and asiya, which means bria means making it from nihilo to existence. Kemuvur b'Ramban and Bereshit bar Elokim, yesh mi'ayin. Yitzira means taking those elements that God created, yesh mi'ayin, and giving them form. You can all read the Ramban Bereshis Perik Aleph Pasuk Aleph, which he elaborates on that. Okay, and finally, this after the form. Now that there's matter and there's a matter and there's a form, then you have a certain product with pratim in it. Okay, that's the asiya, the finalized product with the pratim they have in it. You have X2 eyes, etc. There's the basic idea of giving form to energy and then adding pratim in that form. That's asiya. The realization of the finished product. So all three levels of creation were done for one reason only: kavod shamayim. The fact that there is a massive energy. The fact that afterwards there's a compression of that energy in certain form. The fact that afterwards that compressed energy has certain properties. All three levels of creation are there for one reason only. It's called kavod shamayim. Now the question is, who's megali kavod shamayim? Like, who can see the kavod shamayim in an ant, and who can see a kavod shamayim in an asteroid, and who can see kavod shamayim, I don't know what, in a falling leaf? The only thing which is capable, the only creation which has been granted with the capability of what we would call transcendent thought, be able to think in abstract forms, is Homo sapien, Adam. Rambam really writes in Moreh Nevuchim that Tzelem Elokim means that. Tzelem Elokim means the capability of abstract thought. Functional thought, we're at the bottom of the list. The beaver does not have to go to MIT to learn how to build a dam. The salmon does not need ways to be able to go back to where it was spawned in order to further this gene pool. Dogs have a capability of, you can take, it's actually, without going into stories, that you can put them who knows far from their houses, and a week later they'll come back. Lassie comes home. I added Maisa Shoya with me, so I don't want to go into it late. No joke. They didn't need Waze, and they don't need Google Maps, they don't need anything. We're idiots. We have to go to school to learn how to do the basic, simplest things of existence. And the simple animal functional information needed for its existence, for its food, clothing, and shelter, as much as it needs it, it's intuitive, instinctive. He doesn't need a PhD in anything. He knows which grasses to eat and which herbs to nibble in order to be healthy. Man really has to do so much in order to survive. The Gemara says, Egel ben Yoimid, Kara Egel. Yes, a calf is called a calf. What's a child called at the first day? I can't even describe it. This miserable, red-faced, screaming thing which God made us love in order not to kill it. Because we're going to have sleepless nights for X amount of years, etc. We're doing this because God wants us to nurture this and ultimately become an Adam. But he's very vulnerable. So in other words, when it comes to the capability of abstract thought, there's nothing like us. When it comes to the capability of functional thought, we're at the bottom of the pole. That's the honest truth. Man, to be man, justify his existence, must utilize that property called the abstract thought. If not, as the Gemara says, Yitush Kodmacha, the mosquito is at the top of the list before you. It's as simple as that. That's why man was built at the end. It was created at the end of the creation in order to tell him that. Remember, when it comes to abstract thought, you're at the top of the list. When it comes to functional thought, everyone was before you, and they're better than you. They don't need the mishigashes that you make up. Most of your types and what you're looking for are artificial things which have nothing to do with the world of science. Actually, science says that most of the stuff you're doing and experiencing and looking for is wrong. Whether it's food, shelter, or whatever you do, you don't need this beautiful thatched thing, an artificial Tudor house in Teaneck. What for? A house is there for X. This is not functional. This is for your dream world. That's not functional. That's already, you took your abstract capabilities and take it off to left field. You create your own world. In reality, that's what Tzelem Elokim means. Tzelem Elokim, that the Rambam means literally that. And Rav Blachman goes and says the whole thing, Shar Aleph, that's Kapi Kabbalah. But Mishnas HaRishonim, the capability of abstract thought, capability of transcendent ideas, things which transcend the finite and the mundane. You are capable of thinking of an idea called infinity. You may not understand its essence, but you definitely can think of an idea and mold your life according to those ideals. You look at things in their core reality and based on ideals, and you live and die by them. Like no animal, an animal will die for something functional. He understands that he has to somehow die the lioness in order to save the pride, because the genes must go further. So it's built in. Yes, it's a very functional reality. That makes sense. But to die for a flag, or for a religion, or for the dominance of a certain king, those are ideas which are man-made, which have nothing to do with function. They're anti-function at the best. Man created ideas by which he lives. So you have to read a book by Harari called Sapiens. He actually develops the idea very beautifully. But at the end of the day, there's quite a few pshikla courses there, but there's a lot of good stuff there. Okay? At the end of the day, and we got to tell the truth, okay? But at the end of the day, yes, man has that gift of creating ideals because he has things which are beyond the functional. He sees beyond the functional. That's Tzelem Elokim, that's Adam. The person who creates Kavod Shamayim in this world is Adam. And that's why the Mishnah says in Talmud, why is the Shir Shayim of Friday, Hashem Malach Keyush Levesh? So the Mishnah, because boy Nivra Adam, Shub Mamlich is HaKadosh Baruch Hu Alei Lama. He's the one who sees all this and says, Ma Rabu Masecha Hashem Kulam B'Chachma Asisa Mala Ha'aretz Ki Yanecha. And that becomes the idea and ideal of creation, Kavod Shamayim, and so on and so forth, which we will discuss a little later. Reb Chaim Volozhiner says that that's the pshat in the pasuk, Vayiyah Adam L'Nefesh Chaya. So Reb Chaim Volozhiner in Shar Aleph, Vayiyah Adam L'Nefesh Chaya, what does it mean? It means to say he became the nefesh of all that's alive. Not he became a living being, he became the nefesh of all which is alive. All which is alive is there for man to give it meaning and purpose. This is what moves it to where it's supposed to be. Is when King David can appreciate a spider and understand the kavod shemayim, the chokhmah, and the building of a web of a spider, he was megala, the kavod shemayim of spiders. Man is capable of doing that. The mishpat of Rosh Hashanah, my friends, is l'chayra, is because this was the day when man was created, and that gift of the capability of seeing source of reality and ideals within mundane reality came to this world. That's what this is, Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the day when God can be a melech. You can't be a melech when someone recognizes you. And Adam will recognize the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world by seeing everything as creation of God. He will wonder he will buy a telescope or a microscope, and he will wonder at the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lashon Rama Yirbem Chachmasai Shein LaErech V'Lei Kates. That's covered Shemayim. He will learn math and wonder at the infinite and the wisdom found in math. He says, wow, this is cool. And all this is Chachmasai Yisbarach. Because everything was naught before God wanted it. He'll look at everything around him and he'll see, literally, Lashon HaRambam, Chachmasai, he will feel himself, B'yok Tana Shfeila B'de'a Mu'ata Lifnei Tmim De'ot. Lashon HaRambam, Perik Beis Yisrael, Perik Daled Yisrael Yater. Frightening. That's what he will feel. That's Mamlecha HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aloi Lamai. Let's understand what man was in the beginning to understand what we're supposed to look like. The Gemara says in Chagiga, an Adam Arishain, that he was Sofemi Sofa Olam Vad Sofo. Yeah. It's the Gemara in Chagiga. What does it mean? That he saw the Chinese drinking tea? What does it mean, Sofemi Sofa Olam Vad Sofo? What does it mean? It's a biyaz bekutra what it means. It's based on a Lashon HaRambam and Perik Zayin Yesodi HaTorah, where the Rambam there describes the intelligence of what it takes to be a prophet. And the Rambam says every prophet, this is before you ever prophesied, what kind of a person are you? This is very important to have their chesed to understand who the Nevi'im were. This is what you call the Bnei HaNevi'im. Bnei HaNevi'im were the students which are trying to attain prophecy. Not every student attained prophecy. And some people only prophesize for twice or three times. Not like Yirmiyahu or Amos or Yeshayahu, Yecheskel, that they were busy prophesying. Micha, Shra, Chagai, Nachum, one nevuah. Zer Shein. I mean, that's all he had. He worked all his life to get there. But what was in the meantime? Who was the prophet? So he describes the prophet that he is so broad-minded and so deep that whatever he sees in it, mitabur ha'oretz ad kisei ha'kavod. He sees the total mass of information from the lowest level of reality, what we call the navel of the world, tabu ha'oretz. In other words, he sees things from the lowest place possible, all the way up, seeing that whole mass of how this came from, through physics, metaphysics, ad kisei ha'kavod. He's a master of all the sciences and a master of all the disciplines, which finally lead chain into chain until you get into metaphysics, until finally you see the prime metaphysics, which is the Chizayin of Yecheskel, which is kisei ha'kavod. That's how he looks at anything. Man is so multidisciplined, he doesn't just look at this. What do you see here? You're going to call it an iPhone. No. If you be an artist, you would look at a rectangle. You would look at plastic. You'd look at form. You don't look at these things. But the multidisciplinary person sees so many things here. He also suddenly looks at the idea of electronics and radio waves and I don't know what. All that information is in this little piece of thing. Hey, this is mamash a computer. But you would have gone back 25 years ago, the word computer meant what? Nothing. It meant what you had to do with your head. Today, I'm guessing that most people don't even remember anymore the multiplication tablet, the tables. Who remembers these things? What for? You let your finger move, your brain can go dead. You used to have to work with slide rules. Who works with a slide rule anymore? The finger pushes there and there, and you get your answers. Can you imagine? This is this multi-disciplinary person that sees all that. He sees shapes, he sees forms, he sees sciences, he sees physics, he sees math. And finally, the Navi sees metaphysics. How all this is nothing more than an external expression of a deeper chachma until it gets close to what's called kisei hakavod. And I can't even tell you what it is. But just as you and me, we live very shallow lives. We do not look into the science of things. We don't know the history of things. Do you enjoy, remember Gutenberg when you open a book? Does your mind go through the history of the press or development of paper? Cardboard? Are you kidding? A goyse chiddush. He can tell you the year it started. Do you understand? You know what chachma lies in here? The fonts. Anybody into art? Have you appreciated the fonts? There's so many things to talk about. The Navi sees all that. A breite Mensch. Mitaba ha'oretz vad kisei hakavod. That's a Navi. So next time you look at a Navi, you just relax. Don't start saying, well, he probably was X, he probably was. You have no clue who he was. Because the intelligence that man embodied, you'd have to have 7 lifetimes to get to 1/10 of it. That's a Navi. And this is what Chazal say on Adam Arishon, Seifa miseifa olam v'ad seifa. He saw in everything, not just the end result, but the total beginning of it. Now this is Mefurish in Chumash. Adam was a lonely man. So God says, well, go start dating. So he is very functional, speed dater. God brought him all the animals of creation, and what did he do? He looked at them and said, what is their essence? And the Isis of the Shem, as the Tanya writes in Shayich V'Amunah, are basically is a metaphysical equation of what the essence of you are and what energies that God have to use to create this form. For example, you are called an Aleph with the comments, Daled with the comments, and a Mem Sofit. Adam, look at the word Adam, not just as a word, but also as letters which represent a metaphysical equation. And so he actually decided, he did very fast speed dating. He said, the Ramban points out that if he would have found someone fitting for him, God would have changed his surah. And you would have been able to live with it. If he would have felt that the local dog, you are my type of girl, God would have made it possible. Often the Ramban, you don't learn Chumash with Ramban. He was speed dating. And he wasn't wasting time eating spaghetti and giggling over stupid stories. Rather, what was he doing? He was looking, what is your essence? You're a cat. Ches, Tav, Vav, Lamed. Won't work with an Aladal Nem. No good. You're a horse. Samach, Vav, Samach. Did that work with Aladal? No good. He was speed dating. This is not me. Read Ramban. He was looking into the mucker of what they really were. He looked at them, and that's, since you defined it, that's what it is. And that's why it's called that in Lashon HaKodesh. Because he simply, through the speed dating, identified what it is in its essence, and that became the word which we call it, a sus, a chatul, a kelev, or whatever it only be. This is elaborated in Shar Yuchid V'Amunah in the second half of Tanya. One should read this one day. But this is Dvarim Pshutim found also in Kisvei Ari. The Reb Chaim Volozhiner mentions it. That's what Adam could do. Adam did not look at superficialities. He looked at everything as an expression of the primary source of all, God's Chachma. Which Chachma created which type of form, which equation represents that type of energy and that type of form which created this reality. That's the uniqueness of Lashon HaKodesh, who elaborates on this is the Shalah HaKodesh in the beginning of his book, where he said that's why it's called Lashon HaKodesh. Because we're not talking about reality that we see, we're talking about its source reality. The Shalah writes, when you say the word ayin, we're used to thinking the eye means the human eye. And when they say that God has an eye, yeah, it's like the human eye, right? So you got it all wrong. That's in French. In Hebrew, opposite true. Ayin, the source idea of ayin is Einoi Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the ayin of man is nothing more than a mashal to that ayin. We always think that the ayin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a mashal to the human eye. Zot the Shalah nishtazai. Lashon HaKodesh means it's a transcendent language. Kodesh means transcend. It means you're describing the transcendent. You're describing its source reality. It's Einei HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the source, and the mashal for that is Einei Adam. Unbelievable thing to understand. As the Rajva writes at the beginning of the Dharm, that Lashon Ha'akum are muskamos. Yeah, they decide to make certain noises to call certain things by whatever noise. In Lashon HaKodesh, no, these words actually mean something. They describe its metaphysical essence. It describes the form, or whatever it is, just as if a kid which didn't learn physics goes into a serious physics class and sees all that shit and scratch on the board, he thinks someone went berserk. What are you telling me now? It looks like a bunch of cosines or whatever it is. What are you talking about? That's the theory of relativity. Okay? The text is only a person which chaps and understands physics. When he sees what's on the board, he sees what's there. When you look at for example, when you look at a letter or a word, you say, it's a word! Yeah, you're a hillbilly. Those who understand Kedushas HaIsis and Lashon HaKodesh B'Shosha see letters and Nekudas which represent ideas. And Adam HaRishon was the super understander of these ideas. That's what Adam HaRishon was. I want to describe his downfall, because his downfall is the downfall of all of us and of man. We have a Chumash. Bereshis. Chumash Bereshis. Find me a Chumash. Those who learned Bereshis know that in the first parak of Bereshis, when God creates the world, he's called Elokim. Vayivra Elokim, Vayomer Elokim, 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 Elokim. Now, Elokim here does not mean Lord and Master, because he had no one to be Lord upon yet, no one to be Master upon yet. So why was he called Elokim? Normally, Elokim, is Rashi writes in Sanhedrin, is Milashon Sorora V'Rabbanus, Rashi, Beis and Beis in Sanhedrin. That's only appropriate if there already is a Bria, so you're Elokim, Elokim, or Elohim, on people you were Bayre. But Bereshis, Bar Elokim, Shemayim V'Sa'ars, there was not, as we pointed out before, until there was finally Adam, there was no Metzius of Lord. So what's meant this Elokim and Sheshis Shemei Amaisa, Biz Adam HaRishon? It doesn't mean the Lord, Dafka, that's not the translation of the word. It means, as the Chazal say, Bala Koiches Kulam. The source of all different forms. Yes, God of creation created forms, formed energy. Bereshis Bar Elokim, the God that created all these energies and these forms. And that's the idea of Elokim. Elokim means to say that which makes boundaries. Besides, judges are called Elohim. Okay? He made forms. That's what it is. We talk of Elohim, we talk about the God, the infinite God, which expressed himself in different forms of wisdom, creativity, midas. These are all forms in which the infinite God expressed himself. Chesed, Vert, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayis, whatever it be. The multicolored and multi-energies of the infinite God. And that's called Elokim. Baal HaKochot Kulam. You probably learned this when you did Hilchos Brachos, I hope. Elokeinu Melech HaOlam doesn't just mean Lord, it means Baal HaKochot Kulam. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that's what it means, by the way. What does Yud Kei Vav Kei mean? That doesn't come there. When does Yud Kei Vav Kei come into the Parsha? Yud Kei Vav Kei comes into the Parsha only after Sheni, after Adam is created. And then it's not called Yud Kei Vav Kei alone, it's only called Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim. This is literally in Bereshis, right from Perek Beis. After Adam was created, it says, Elu Tei L'Shamayim Ba'aretz V'Baram B'Yom Asois Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim Eretz V'Shamayim. And that is called that way all the way until the expulsion from Eden. He's called Yud Kei. This is the first time when he's called Yud Kei Vav Kei, and he's only called that together with the word Elokim until the expulsion from Eden. Post expulsion from Eden, once again, rarely do they come together. If you look carefully, when do those two names come together? They come when we talk about the basic core of our faith. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. V'ashivoyse eluvavecha ki havayu Elokim b'shemayim mal v'ostach seinoid. On Har HaKarma with Eliyahu, when they had to admit that God is the Lord, Hashem hu Elokim. That's what you say, Motzi Yom Kippur. Normally in the Chumash and the Nach, it's either Yud Kei Vav Kei or Elokim. And there multiple times Yud Kei Vav Kei means, once again, the God who has Rachamim, if you really want to know. Elokim, the God of stern judgment, or the Lord. That's true in the rest of the Chumash. In others, we have different stages in the name, the relationship between the word Yud Kei Vav Kei and Elokim. Until Adam was created, there's no Yud Kei Vav Kei. Just talking about God of form, energies. Then we have Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim, which I explain in 2 minutes. And post the Girush, all of a sudden it's either A or B, but they mean other things. What does it mean, Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim? It's brought only in that parsha in the Chumash. Adam and Eve with creation prior to their expulsion. And there's only two psukim in the middle, which the word Elokim sits on its own, in the dialogue between the serpent and Eve. Afki amar Elohim kol etzadas v'chol etc. And she reciprocated and said the same thing. I'll read it soon. In that dialogue between the serpent and her, which Chazal say on that conversation was equal as a mashal to a sexual encounter, and he polluted her with his pollution. A Gemara Chagiga Hitul Ba Zoyama. More in Shabbos, excuse me. More in Shabbos. Hitul Ba Zoyama. That pollution we're still worried about. Hitul Ba Zoyama, so to speak, metaphorically, had a sexual encounter. That conversation was so piercing and so, it's such an effect. The example Chazal give is a sexual encounter. And he filled her with his pollution, so to speak. And that was a conversation in which he says to her, just use the words. He says to her, Nachash haya aru mikol chayes hasadeh asher asa Hashem Elokim. The Nachash was made by Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim. Vayomer ela isha afki amar Elokim lo tochlu mikol eitz hagan. He's the first time in this parsha where he says Elokim alone. And on that she answers, Vatemer isha ela nachash pri eitz hagan nocher pri eitz hagan asher b'toich hagan amar Elokim lo tochlu mimenu v'lo tzigu mimenu. Nachish answers, no, tamusun ki yodeh Elokim v'chulu, and that sheet goes bad. What happened here? It's a davar pasha, and this is the source of all of our sins. This is what we call the cardinal sin. What happened here is very simple. Adam perceives reality at a high level of intelligence. The man which was created for kavod shamayim was not you or me. It was a person which naturally had the gift of seeing everything, in every symptom he saw the cause. In every reality, in every tabu ha'oretz, he saw kisei hakavod. For him, there was no Torah umada. Mada is Torah. It's all chachmas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what he saw. For him, a bar mitzvah present would be a telescope, not some tie cloth with a yud ches and a magen David on it, or give him a ktsois. That he definitely won't understand. You know what I mean? At least give him a telescope. He should see Ma Rabu Masech Hashem Kulam B'Chochma Asisa. Think of it. And this is Adam HaRishon. Everything is Chachmasa, Yerbe Chachmasa, Shein La'erech, V'lo Gates. This is how, that's what he saw. He saw all of creation, nothing more than one big base medrash of kavod shamayim. Because he didn't just see form, he saw the word Yud Kei Vav Kei. What does the word Yud Kei Vav Kei mean? So the Ramban writes on the pasuk, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Hay ve'kadmoin, Asher mimenu hakol b'chefetz v'yachelis. The primary existent, which is the source of all, expression of his omnipotence and his will. Literally, the source of all. As the Rambam writes in Ilchis Yisodi HaTorah, when we say Hashem Elokim Emes, it doesn't mean he doesn't fib. It means he's an absolute existent. He's not relative to anything. He's not dependent on anything. He didn't have a father or a non-married mother. There's no reason for him. He's not existing because of something. He's existing. An absolute reality says there's no such thing except for God that's that. Everything else is created because of a reason. You're there because our father and mother and I met each other, and chromosome X met chromosome Y, and look at you, hallelujah. And how did they come to being? Because one day God said, Nasa. Obviously, he didn't go to a sandbox like my nephew, grandchildren, and said, okay, let's make a man and blow into it. It's obviously a mushal which no one understands what happened. God knows how long it took. We're not going there. Okay, whatever it be, that process, as the Ramban says, he doesn't know why by separation was written. No one knows what it means anyway. Okay, you don't really think that God said, Nasa, let's make a man. You know, the kids doing them in sand lots. And he blew into it, and obviously out came a man. You can try blowing into the sand as much as you want, nothing's going to happen. So obviously we're talking about a whole reality there, whatever happened, and how long it took. God knows what it took. The Ramban says he doesn't know, I can know. So Mela, it's a davar pasha. Yeah, so what happened at this stage? We know one thing, he saw the infinite God, source of all. That's what Yud Kei Vav Kei means. Expressed in form. Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim means infinity, the source of all, expressed in certain tzimtzumim or constrictions into forms. He saw God painter expressed in the painting. When you look at a book, if you really know how to look, you look for the author's face in the book. When you start learning Rishonim like a mensch, you want to know who they were and how they thought. You want to know, where is the Rashba in this Rashba? Until you do that, and you don't have your hand on his pulse, you say terrible things. Yeah, it takes years. How can you talk about a Rambam without finishing all Kisvei Rambam, all Tshuvas Rambam? You don't know his language. You don't understand B'daik in his language. You don't know how he writes. You don't know the logic of his syntax. It really takes ages. Get news for you. For real scholarship, And just saying a little chefza gavra and a chalosh, so you do it now and play and feel good about yourself if you want. I mean, I have no problem, I prefer having a cup of whiskey, you know what I mean? But, if you want to do it, do it. Simple as that. You want to know somebody, learn his language, learn his thought process, then tell me what he says. That's how it works. That's real, that's learning. Okay? That's why it takes so many years. It's such much effort. Really, I mean, the Gemara says the way it is. Miyat sheina, miyat achila, You want to gain weight for Ami Yishmerabas. That's about it. You know what I mean? You want to work, Achi, Kansu Adam, Tibeter, Techmeav, Yispal Shalai, Kansu Achila Vishtir, Techmeav. Not because Achila Vishtir is a ma'akib. Because you have other things in your mind, you're not going to get there. It's as simple as that. You have to be an obsessed reader, an obsessed thinker. You'll learn Torah, you'll be kind of mitzvahs, but you won't know. Torah, not everyone's supposed to be, everyone should try, but whatever it be, it is. So you have to chap what this is. You see the author. Anybody, if you know Mozart and Mozart's life, you understand his crazy life, and then you listen to the music, you chap something that you wouldn't chap otherwise. To see the author in the book is to really understand the book. Because Baruch Hu writes a Gemara in Shabbos, the word Anoichi means Anon Nafshi Kasaf Tehiv. I wrote myself in a book and I gave myself to you. Equals, go find me in the book. Up for the Gemara in Shabbos. Go find me in the book. Learn the book until you find out what are my values, what makes me move, what's important to me. As much as you can know anything. You can't know his essence, but you can definitely understand his interactive personality. What are his value systems? Believe me, you'll learn about a lot of what God perceives is correct in interpersonal relationships. You'll understand certain values of philosophical underpinnings of what's there. Your life will change. You'll have a certain idea in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But for that, you have to do all that and distill it. Doesn't work with 1 or 2 years. You have to do it. Now, do you understand? That's what Admar Rishon saw in everything. He saw Havaya Elokim. He saw the source, God in essence, as the Rambam Marin Nevuchim says, Havaya is the Shem Etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He doesn't even understand what it means. The Shalah says it means Havaya, she's Mahaves HaKoyel. The Ramban says, Oive Kadmon, Shakol Mimenu B'chefetz V'yochelis. The common denominator in all three, you experience the core of existence, called God. The infinite core of existence is expressed in finite form. Do you see God when you see an iPhone? The best you see is a cherem. Do you see Chachmas HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Do you see Kvoda Yisbarach? Nechteketuk. We don't even see science. We don't see math. What do we see when you see a chocolate fudge sundae? What do you see? Taivas! That's what you see. What do you see? What are you impressed by? You create an imaginary reality which has nothing to do with science or any level of source. You take a symptom and give it its own meaning based on your social norms, which has nothing to do with any truth which is there behind it. Equals its science, its math, let alone its metaphysics, let alone its Ritzoni Yisborach, let alone its Yiusa Yisborach. How far is the Homo sapien today from what Homo sapien was? It's not even a mushal of a mushal of a mushal. That man was the man which was supposed to do one mitzvah and stay with it, and then he would be Megalu Kavod Shemayim. And he was the purpose of creation. He failed. And look what happened, where the failure lies. Yes, when man is introduced, God is introduced as Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim, because that is the perception seen in the eyes of man. And thus he can only see things in their absolute truth, and doesn't even have the capability of seeing things subjectively, and seeing things and making up meaning and purpose. All the halachas of tznius are based on the fact that human beings do not see things through science. I don't think there's halachas of tznius when you go to the kibbutz and see the cows. They don't actually have to hide the procreative active organs. Yet when it comes to the Homo sapien, he also didn't in the beginning. This is Ritzonius book. This is Ritzonius book. This is all my cliches for Ritzonius book. What happened afterwards? Rambam describes him in the Nevuchim and Perek Beis. He fell into subjective existence, not seeing anything for what it is anymore, but rather giving it its own interpretations. What he calls Yedias HaMefurshamos versus Yedias HaEmes. Ultimately, he created a world of dreams in which he lives in and is challenged by it. He never really looks for truth anymore. For the truth will lie first and foremost in the chachma, the simple chachmas of sciences, ultimately into the chachma of metaphysics, halacha, Ritzoni Yisborach, ultimately atzmusa Yisborach. We don't do that. We eat what's not healthy. We do everything which is wrong. We're anti-science. We're anti-man. We definitely do not see, as Rav Blachman says, whatever you do, you should ask the question 1 minute. Is there kavod shemayim in this or isn't there? Is that anybody's cheshbon? Whatever you do, the first thing you should ask, is there kavod shemayim in this or not? Everything you should ask, is there kavod shemayim here? You have 2 things to do. The first question is, where is there more kavod shemayim? Should be a doctor or a lawyer. Where's the more kavod shemayim? His lashon is v'im yeshem kavod shemayim yaseh v'im lo yaseh. I don't think we're holding them. But halavai should at least be a question, at least part of the considerations. It's not even there. So removed. How did that happen? And the answer is because that's exactly what the Nachash did. In his encounter with Eve, he taught her something which she wasn't aware of. She lived her intense experience of Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokim, and he introduced her. This is the Zayim of the Nachash. Forget the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Focus only on Elokim. Don't think of the source. Look at the forms. Yes, it's a godly form, but take away the author from the book. That's what the Marija Katili writes in Shari Oire. He calls this kitzutz benetius. You cut away the yisoid from the malchus. I don't have to talk these certain lashonis, nothing to get to the rabbim. He took away the author from the book. Now you can make whatever meaning in the book that you want. Isn't that what people do? There's a whole school of thought in literature that we don't care about the intent of the author. We look at the words and we give them meaning that we want. I even got this great book, which they gave me an extra 20 empty pages. Now write the end according to how you want it. It's a great book. Kind of a friend of mine, Dr. in London. That's a whole new approach. The author is just the guy, the Hechetimsa, that put word letters there. Now make what you want about it. That's called lekatzitz benetiyos. You cut away the root from the tree. The tree is there, but the fruit do not come from the root anymore. They come from your imagination. The lashon the Rambam Mer in the Nevuchim is once that happened, immediately she said, "V'chitayva hu la'inayim." She all of a sudden had obsessive desires which were not logical. And she said, "Toiva eis l'ma'achal." What is toiv? Toiv is a relative term. Good means what? Good for me. That's not science. He didn't say nachon. She didn't say, it's true, it makes sense. She said, it's good. We know what the word good means. That's good. She lost. She agreed, hey, let's think this way. Let's be free of the almost oppressive idea of seeing truths. Because it binds you to certain realities, doesn't give you freedom. Let's enjoy the freedom. And ultimately, through freedom, come to truths. Granted. But God didn't want that. God gave them a capability of seeing truths the way they are, and He wants them to live that way. Adam and Eve chose to listen to the Nachash. This is the pollution of the Nachash. To walk away from thinking mathematics, metaphysics, truths, absolutes, into a subjective reality, which means the world of La La Land, dreaming, making up meaning, the world of fashion, etc. Of course. Now you will wear, I always tell them, my nieces, yeah, you're wearing these stiletto heels. Believe me, those streetwalkers in Paris wouldn't walk like that. You know what I mean? And you're walking with these stiletto heels like a balancing act. It's going to kill your back in 20 years from now. Nishkin Nafkamina, she has a certain purpose. Well, I'm a bad uncle, so I describe the purpose. Okay? She has a certain anatomical purpose to wear stiletto heels. So I want to tell you what you're doing, then I start describing it in biology. Says, come on, Uncle, stop it. You're messing it up. Yeah, I know I'm messing it up. But that's what God wants you to do. He wants you to think science. This is what you're doing. You have X amount of muscles which are protruding. You want to express them. You're basically, I went with my wife shopping. And I saw this sign in Nordstrom. Nordstrom's a Choshev store, right? I pay money to go to Nordstrom's. Yes, the idea was you have to show your assets, and they did not mean the portfolio that I have in real estate. Okay, it was a PR for tight jeans for females. So the idea it was to show your assets. So I looked at my wife. She's a very intelligent lady. She says, "That's all the assets you have?" It was a busha v'charpa. But that's what people do, right? Is this science? No. I can tell you exactly what those assets are for. They have a certain evolutionary meaning. It's very understood words, therefore I'm not talking about this is not a biology class. Okay, they're to counterbalance pregnancy for you want to know. And therefore, etc. What's it got to do with anything? Why is it interesting? Why aren't you focusing on my nose? It also has a biological function. Why do you give certain meanings to certain parts of your skeletal or muscular physique more than others? Purely dimyonis. Why? Because you've walked away from objective thinking. Thus, you've created your own worlds, and that's what God said they would do. Didn't the Nachash say you would do that? You're there, Elokim. And what does it say over there? That once you eat this, you will do what? Vayisim kelohim yodei tov v'ra. What does Rashi write? B'nei olamus. Did you build a new world lately? Of course they built new worlds. They built enormous worlds of imagination. A whole new reality was created. Before it was an objective reality of science and metaphysics. And all of a sudden became a world of, like Lewis Carroll was happy. One big acid trip. This is all Rambam, by the way. All this is found in Perek Beis in Nevuchim, where he describes this. Not the Shem Yavaya Elokim, but the idea of falling away. Adam's fall was falling away from objective thought into subjective experiences. The way you do it is by cutting away, putting the source of truth in the back burner, ultimately forgetting it. And religion says Havayahu Elokim. And Enochanami, when God wanted to clean the Jews of this pollution in Matan Torah, so it says V'yadat hayam v'asher ata areisa ladas. This Moshe Rabbeinu described in Har Sinai. Ki Havayahu Elokim. And that Zarma was going to leave them. But then we messed up with this golden calf, and we're stuck with it. You have to understand. The solution to all this is Havayahu Elokim. That's the solution to all this. This is what Adam was. Now one has to understand the mishpat that you have on Rosh Hashanah is to what extent have you tried your best? That for you, Havaya is Elokim. Question is not what you've done, but how your actions attest to who you are. L'mashal, when it says, Tzadikim, Nichtav Nigzorim La'alter, Rishoim, etc., Beinim Tluyim V'Oimdim. Rambam says, Imos Teshuva, good, if not, not. And you know, Rabbi Tziluk, Peterberger, Rabbi Yisrael, brings asked the question, what does he need Teshuva for? One mitzvah will do, tip the scales. So they answer, Ashtikal Lamdas, if he doesn't do Teshuva, it's a bit limited to say, this is for the Kinderlach. We all know that except for the Ramban, no Rishon thinks it's a mitzvah to say, it's a Narishkeit. So this is all for the Kinderlach. Okay, so what's Taka the Pshat? So I heard from my Rebbe Rav Hutner, he was a wise man. He said, I know where he's coming from. I'm just talking from him because that's already accessible. He says, when we look at the Mishpat of Rosh Hashanah, we're not looking at what you did, but how by your actions it attests who you are. A person which is roiv zchuyos, ידיד אני באמצע שיעור. אני באמצע שיעור עכשיו, אתה בשידור חי. תתצלצל יותר מאוחר, בבקשה. That's your Baltikiyah. Okay. She says, what does it mean? You know, a person which has built a world in which he's trying to grow, he'll fail. But at the end of the day, he'll be roiv zchuyos. A person which is the opposite of that, which doesn't really care too much, he'll also do good things, but he'll be roiv chayvus. You know what a Beni is? Beni is a person who hasn't taken a stand. He has no personality. Does this, he does that, everything's, he can do this, he can do that. There's no Kabbalah's oil and there's no Prikus oil. He's blasé. Adgornished. The person is a nothing. He's not Kabbalah's oil, he's not a Pyrikol. What we call a traditional Jew. He does things. But there's no brain there. There's no heart there. That's what it is. Mitzvahs anoshim milumada, that Yirmiyahu describes us in a bad state. We do things out of tradition, out of rote. There's no really religious persona which has decided what is my relationship with God, and do these mitzvahs express my relationship, for good or for bad. No mitzvah will help this man. Because it'll be just another blasé mitzvah. The only thing can help him is changing, going through a metamorphosis. Teshuva. His teshuva is not on Aveiros. His teshuva on the fact that he is not Mekabel Ol Shemayim. He's not a Pyrikol, but he's not a Mekabel Ol. The mishpat on Rosh Hashanah is to what extent have you been Mamlecha Kadosh Baruch Hu Al Olamai? To what extent do you live with the will, wish, to desire, to aspire that Havaya Hu Elokim? To what extent do you really mean Kriya Shema when it says Shema Yisrael Havaya Elokeinu Havaya Echad Hay v'Kadmon Shemimenu Hakol B'Chefetz V'Yacheles V'Lechein Hu Elokeinu. Therefore, the agenda is His, because we are nothing more than expressions of His will. Havaya Echad means if anybody davens the Nusach the Edus Mizrach Tanvel Yipasach Eliyo Antu Chad V'Lo B'Chushbon. You are not one of numbers. You're the absolute one. Equals not the one. One of numbers is nothing more than a category of how to decide numerous fragmented realities. You're pure oneness. There is no fragmentation in you. There's nothing more than expression of you. Antu Chad, you are one, but not the one of numbers. It doesn't mean you are one versus the Trinity. You are one and not the one of numbers. You'll be singing that when you see Shir Yichud and Leil Yom Kippur. You'll see plenty of that over there. That's the kavanah of Kriya Shema. That's what the Ramban calls Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shamayim in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Asagis of Mitzvah Aleph. That's the avoid of Rosh Hashanah. Kabbalas Oil Malchus Shemayim, which means to say that Yud-Kei Vav-Kei Elokeinu, bringing back the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei to the Elokah. That's what we try to do all through history. And your mishpat on Rosh Hashanah is to what extent have your Maisim expressed that. Doing a Maisa out of tradition, you're a Beinoni. You have not justified your existence because your existence is, again, Yom HaShishi B'Ai Nivra Adam Shemamlich Es HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aloi Lamai, which means to say he sees in everything covered Shemayim, and that which drives him to do Ratzon HaBorei. But doing Ratzon HaBorei without that major nekuda that Havaya Hu Elokim, to be very frum, but not to see God, Creator, and His Chachma in the total world around us, not to appreciate a comet and understand Chachmas HaKadosh, you're missing a tremendous part of your basis of religion. Rambam the Meir says that when Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Kadosh Baruch Hu, "Areini nos drachecha," when he asked for, listen, I really have to understand you. I need to know all the sciences. He says, you know everything. So God gave him everything, except for one thing. He didn't give him the key to why. For that, he gave him hindsight. Ra'i says, "Achorai upanai lo tiro." Areini nos drachecha. You want to know why and thus understand the roadmap? No. Human beings cannot perceive that, for that lies in the essence of God. And the essence of God is beyond by the capability of the finite form called a man. Lo yirani odom v'chai does not mean I'm a dragon. If you open the door, I'll spit fire at you. You can't be a living entity and see God, so to speak. See means contain, perceive. It's only in the Shammos without gufim have somewhat of a saga in Metzius HaBorei, which is called Nenem Ziva Shechina. But in the Shammos Shabteicha Guf, impossible. That's where the Rambam Shita is, that the final reality will be the Shammos without guf. Rambam, say that to you. So you understand that's the mishpat of Rosh Hashanah. That is the mishpat of Rosh Hashanah. The mishpat of Rosh Hashanah, to what extent is Havayu Elokim. Now here's something very important. There's a famous Taisvis in Rosh Hashanah Chav Zayin. It says this machlaikis as to whether B'Nisan Nivra Eilam or Tishra Nivra Eilam. So he says, we say Yom Haras Eilam. On the other hand, he points out that the piyutim of the Kalir, there's a stira. Sometimes he mentions Rabbi Yehuda Yeshua, and sometimes he mentions Rabbi Lazar. Not going into why we should care about stiras in the Kalir, that's another topic. Taking for granted that the Rebbeinu Tam felt, as many people did in his time, that the Kalir was written by someone very early, a bit earlier than who it really was. Some people attributed the Kalir to Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon. This is not the time to talk about that. That's if I would ever give a course in rabbinic history, that would be interesting, but not, I guess, not here. Definitely not here, or here, but whatever. But Lamaisa, what he says is written in the Ari, so I don't care. Such Rabbeinu Tam that the Kalir believes that there's no stira. That the Ola b'machshava of building the world, creating the world, what we call the God created the world with thought, a machshavas of a Kadosh Baruch Hu or do something. The core of reality started. That's Takawen in Tishrei. Practically, when did it come into being? In Nisan. The Ari writes the same thing. Now here's something very, 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 very important. You see, when you say there's a cycle of time, you're taking for granted that you have a point, and then there's like a linear reality, and it comes back cyclically to the same point. Here, my birthday, whenever it is, Okay, it's a set point of time, and then there's like a linear reality which is cyclical, and come back to the same point in time next year, the year following. That's my birthday, right? That is all true if you take for granted that creation is stable, and now you're going through time. But Jews don't believe that. You say every day in davening, "Hamachadesh betuvay, b'chol yom tamid ma'asav v'reishis," which means to say the reason that you exist at this moment is because God wants you now. The reason you will exist in 5 minutes from now is because God will want you then. There's a constant rejuvenation of the Nasa Adam of Yehira Kia happening every iota of time. Equals in all truth, although we see reality externally as stable, in reality it's unbelievably dynamic. God is constantly expressing, let it be, 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 let it be. He's saying it all over again. La'olam Hashem dvorcha nitzav b'shamayim. Pasuk in Kufiyut Tesen Tehillim, and the Medrash there writes exactly that. That your Amira, the Hirakia, is constantly resonating, and that's why the sky exists. You can look it up in Shachartai, Medrash Tehillim. If that's the case, time is actually not linear, but dot. So you can't really have a linear time, so there's really no cycle. So Hayom Haras Olam, every iota of time is Haras Olam. So what's unique about Rosh Hashanah? Very simple question. If we perceive linear time as nothing more than our figurative imagination, because just like we don't see science, we don't see metaphysics. But if we'd open our eyes and we would see it, we would realize it's dot. It's like you have these big pictures that, if you go close, you see all the little pixels. From far, it looks like a big picture. If you go close, you see there's a little dot with the red and blue in it, the dot with yellow and green in it. And from close, they look like a whole bunch of dot balls. And so, you ever go see these posters on a bus station? That's what you see. From far, it looks like Marilyn Monroe. From close, abande kadurim ktanim. So you're right. In your shallow experience, you're realizing time as nothing more than a stable reality, and you're now gauging the amount of time of that stable reality. But if you accept the fact that it's actually a dynamic reality, which is constantly being created, so you can't religiously say that this means anything. So why are we telling me Hayom Haras Olam? If God would say it's a holiday of agriculture, like all the other holidays, okay, so agriculture is a human experience, so experience is cyclically. But if you're talking about Hayom Haras Olam, Hayom Yom of Mishra, today's the day of creation, and therefore I assess, that has to do with time as far as the truth is concerned, so why is that true? And the answer is a very simple answer. You make decisions in life. All of you will be making real decisions. And usually that decision was like, it had a certain, I want to do this. And afterwards you just continue doing it and you somehow lose the taste of that beautiful, really wanted to do it in the beginning. Like I remember when I first came to Eretz Yisrael, wow. Got off the plane, fell down on the floor and kissed the tarmac, you know what I mean? Eretz Yisrael, wow. I can tell you long stories about how long that lasted. At the end of the day today, I don't kiss the tarmac anymore. I didn't do it because the Gemara says, no. I did it because I really wanted to kiss Eretz Yisrael. I don't have that anymore. After 67, when we got back to Kaisla, I was saying Tikka Chatzos every day. Went to the Kaisla again. I broke my Seder Shlishi. Used to go to the Kaisla before 12 to say Tikka Chatzos. Good, so it lasted for X amount of time. Now, it's like benched. You know what I mean? You get used to things. You take things for granted. There's a big difference between the tainug, which creates the ratzon of achlata, and the Mitzias which has the Ratzon of Hemshech HaAchlata. The Ratzon of Hemshech HaAchlata does not necessitate the Tainug which creates the first Achlata. I really want to do this. Okay, like you propose to your wife. How would you know? Believe me, it's a ganze Spiel. Today they make, ich weiß nicht what, they go to Disneyland, I don't know what they do, they jump off bridges, they do whatever they do. I'm talking about normal people. Okay? A Mulligezeiten. Without that, it's a ganze Spiel. It's not a production for YouTube. It's a whole emotional reality. If I would live all day with that feeling and my wife would believe me, we would never have a disagreement. We would constantly be like glassy-eyed, right? Now, why aren't we glassy-eyed the whole time? Because we've learned. Okay. So why are you married? It's a Ratzon of Hemshech. What do you think anniversaries are for? To conjure up the original Tainug of the Achlata. They have, in some society, what you call renewal of vows. You ever hear of that? Okay, people get together, she can't fit into it anymore, neither can he, but so to speak, they try to fit into it, and they make renewal of vows. These are all dimyonis that people try to do to bring back the original Tainug. It's a different passion. So you're right. The Ratzon Hemshech is dot. But there is the Tainug of the Achlata, which is a certain point of time which doesn't continue. And there it's linear to that point of time. I could say, do I have an anniversary b'chol yom? I could say it. Yeah. But there's the cycle of when did it happen at that point of time. It's a biyas b'kutcha. Those who think will chap that the Mishra of Rosh Hashanah, God does not. God continues creating the world, but the time He comes and asks when the day when He actually had that tainug, and He said, "I'm going to do this," He reassesses. Do I really want to continue to do this again? He actually is now asking himself, Nasi Adam? But now he's not Nimlich and Pamaya Shemaila. Now he looks and says, well, what has man done to justify it? I want to renew my vows. I want to decide that this process should continue. But then I have to see to what extent is he involved in that tainuk. So the mishpat is, to what extent do you justify that plan, that time? God, you propose, you have all these dreams of marriage. It's beautiful, okay? And it's great to look back after some years. Wow, we really have a beautiful life. It's very special. It's a beautiful thing to see. But God actually decides every year whether He wants to continue the story, depending on how much time He has from this bria. How much kavod shemayim is being generated, because that's the type of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, kol hanikol shmi l'chvodi barasi yitzati v'afasisi. Should I continue this? Does man justify being nefesh kol chai? Giving meaning to all of reality. Is man giving meaning to everything by seeing it through Yud-Kei Vav-Kei Elokim? That's the mission of Rosh Hashanah. Mr. Rishon, to what extent does man see the core in the symptom? Does man see the author in the book? Does man see all the supernal truths when he looks at reality? Or is he living a very shallow life? To what extent is man using the Tzelem Elokim to see those Yud-Kei Vav-Kei in Elokim? Or is the man not even looking at form? He's just looking, yeah, man, that's a book. You're all going to hopefully go to some higher education. I really do suggest the sciences. But do it as a real Ben Torah. Use it as a kli for avosei, v'yirosei, v'yidiyosei. That's unbelievable. That's a Rambam person. Whatever you read, whatever you do, whether you use the humanities, use that as a kli for avosa v'yirosai. Understanding human nature will tell you a lot about yourself and about the people around you. Ultimately, you will somehow understand the way how to deal with the Kadosh Baruch Hu and understand the Mikras in a certain way. Everything should be a kli to get back to Yud-Kei Vav-Kei Elokim. That's the mishpat. That's what this is all about. So it's true, you know, the din is Adam Nidin B'chol Yom, the Gemara says. We have a mishpat every day, we have a mishpat every Rosh Chodesh, we have a mishpatim. God's constantly assessing us. These are all mishpatim within the Hemshech, in the Ratzon of Hamshacha, the Ratzon of Achlata. The original says, I want to do this for a purpose. That's Rosh Hashanah. That's why the mishpat is not what you're doing. To what extent are you expressing that purpose? It's your world of machshava, which is nidin on Rosh Hashanah, not your world of maisin. It's your maisin. To what extent do they express the machshava? You can make all the kabbalahs in the world. If they don't create a profounder person, you missed it. It's as simple as that. The real one Kabbalah which is needed, you must promise yourselves, I'm going to try to think. Always think, why, where does it come from, what for? To what extent am I living a life of thought? To what extent am I trying to see the source in the result, the author in the book, the painter in the painting? The sculptor in the sculpture. To what extent do I see the whys? Where's it coming from in anything? In a Blat Gemara, it's the same thing. To what extent do I see the Rashba in the Rashba? It is a way of life. It's not just a way. It's a way of everything. This affects and the mishpat is on that. Very sweet boy, you learn 3 Taisus and you know a few Gemara, very sweet. What about the rest of it? What do you see when you see a bottle of glass? Well, you don't know much about the history of glass. If you would, you'd see unbelievable things. And then you would see Chachmasa Yisborach. The more you're aware of the complexity of reality, the deeper you're aware of the Chachmasa Sha'akadosh Baruch Hu. And the Rambam writes before that the derech la'avos Hashem v'yirasai is through understanding the Chachma Kadosh Baruch Hu and the Bria. This is no joke. This mamish affects everything. Ask my poor wife. She knew what she was getting into. But yeah, this is the mishpat hayom. I want you to understand that. That's why this mishpat is dafka on Rosh Hashanah. Now, you see, Mrs. Sherm writes, Sharas Rizas, he says, God is emes. What's the story about telling you he's going to forgive you if you do tshuva? Come on, I'm sorry, you eat, drink arsenic, you die. How all of a sudden I'm going to undo that? So Ramchal writes that there is something like that in this world. What is it? Nidor. A neder is a mashal of a metzias that words have only meaning if they express the intent of the speaker. Should these words not express the intent of the speaker, equals these external realities, not express the will of its source, they are meaningless. That's called the Torah Nedarim. Externally, it's a big world. Asar Mamoris Nivra, big world out there. Without it being the expressed intent of he who uttered those words, it's meaningless. HaTorah Nedarim is based on the idea that Allah says, yes, these words create whatever they create, only if they are constantly an expression of he who made those words. If you can tell us that when they were made, that will was not the way it should be done, thus it did not really express it, it's meaningless. It's oikelim afreya. He says that's what teshuva is. You know what teshuva is? If you actually can come back to Yudke Vavke Elokecha, you actually, because of this fall, come back to a profound awareness and you have a different relationship with God, then that external reality was meaningless. You're now a different person. You have a different relationship. I want to teach you something you should know. In real intense relationships, and we all do stupid things in life. There's nothing perfect. There's no perfect husband. Take me for an example. You'd be surprised. There's no perfect wife. There's definitely no perfect child, and thus no perfect yeshiva. So no one needs a perfect yeshiva because you're an imperfect person. So why would anybody need the perfect yeshiva? Okay, there is no perfect anything except for my imperfect understanding of a perfect God, which I only understand imperfectly. Nothing's perfect. Get that straight. What happens is you're going to say stupid things and you're going to make stupid mistakes. I don't want to discourage your life, but that's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you now a little secret. Saying you're sorry doesn't work because there's residue. There's residue. You know what works? When you mutually find a plane of relationship which is bigger or deeper than the one before, and at that plane, at that level, that was stuck and meaningless. If your relationship is much deeper or much profounder, it's shtiyut. It's like when you get angry, when you're angry, you say certain things, and things anger you relax a little bit. He says, what were they angry for? That was stupid. You suddenly develop you change your perception of reality, and you even feel embarrassed that you were angry. At the time, it was like, yavar. And you opened up a mouth as if it was the Gehenna coming out of it. You know what I mean? Yeah, relax. You know, the worst thing is after you realize you were an idiot, then the guy comes and says, I'm sorry I made you angry. He made you feel even worse. Now I really know I'm an idiot. You know what I mean? It's always a problem to say, I'm sorry I made you angry. Yeah, thank you. Tell me I was an idiot. I know already. You know, but it's an interesting nakuda that in real relationships, sorry doesn't help. You know what helps? Find a place where you people are better than that, where this is meaningless. Lashon of the Rabbi Maral is in the Siva Teshuva. You know what real Teshuva is? When he comes back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, equals, i.e., Havaya Lekecha, Hachet Mistalik Me'elav. Lashon the Maral. Yeah. It becomes meaningless. You know, that was your shallow self. Yeah, your shallow self is an idiot. We know, but now we know you're somebody else. That shallow person actually, with that stupid thing, was catapulted into getting a real relationship. So thank God for your mistakes. They actually did you a favor. That's what Steinis Naslik Zachias means. So real tshuva is becoming another person. Rambam writes this mefurish, the derech about tshuva is to change name or whatever it be. Internally, you have to find a new place of your relationship. I'm sorry. Give me a break. You say that every year. No. Say Havaya Lekecha. Say I wish to will, to want, to aspire, to actually start seeing things. That's the real Kabbalah. Your problem is not in your pratim, because you're always going to fail in pratim. And your problem is not because you had a problem with pratim, shtiyot. Your reason for sin is because you cut away Yudke Vavke from Elokecha. Because you didn't look at whatever you're doing in its source form to understand what's the meaning of it and why you're doing things. You didn't look at your life like you should be looking at a taisvus. The only people you know to ask embarrassing questions are other people. You never asked yourself an embarrassing question. You don't live with cheshbon. You're living in dimyonis. Subjective reality, which is la la land. You and Alice having a party. So that's why you have crazy people there at the party, you understand? Of course, you're living in imagination. The real Kabbalah, and this everyone can do. And you're going to fail, don't worry about it, you fail. But the wish, the will, to want, to aspire, ultimately, you know what these Yom Kippurs do? They stop the Aveira Gereris Aveira train. You know, comes Tishrei Elul, like, it doesn't go, you start thinking a little bit, right? Then by Hanukkah, you're roaring again. But after X amount of stops in life of Elul Tishrei, if you really do it well, the train actually doesn't roar out that fast anymore. The more you've trained yourself, I have to think. I have to ask why. Maz, makatuvkan, lama. You know, every question you ask in a blood, you should ask in a blood Gemara. That's what you should be asking in the book that you read called Chol Masechet B'Sefer Nichtavim. You ask those questions and you make a Kabbalah to do that, to wish, to will, to want, to pray for that. That's Atachenu L'Adam Das. That's Hashavina Vilus Sarsecha. That's real vidud. I am a nincompoop, shallow fool, and therefore I am a hormonal animal. I act as a fool. I am treacherous to the truth, and that's the honest truth. That's what bagatti. Okay? Should I start telling you what Ish Hashamnu means? Or maybe you should look at it carefully and translate it to your own lives. What does it mean to you, and what have you done? Stop reading all these different translations of booklets to give you extra. I saw this one thing, on Kuf, Karati Itonim Chilonim. Believe me, I got other problems with, you know what I mean? I read the New York Times. This should be my problem. There's plenty of Averis you can think about coming just from the words. Take the words, and how do you understand them? What did you do, which was this? You write it yourself. Forget the Chayodom. Forget all these things. Write your own book. It's your Averis. It's your book. Write it. That's what you should be doing. I don't understand how people do video with all these. They take out all these books and they start reading. I don't know. This is kulei shitchis and not emes. Emes would demand, if you really, what you're doing is in video, you're puking, you know, it's a cathartic experience. You're really actually opening up your box and saying the way it is. You're calling yourself terrible names. If you walk away from the liturgy, but just, what are you really saying? If you don't understand what you're saying, your mom is describing yourself in a terrible way. Do you mean it? Okay, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? Everyone has to know what he means. So Archcroll says, what's Archcroll got to do? That's Zlanowitz. What's this with? What do you mean? He has his Hashamnu, you better find your own. He had his Bagadnu, you should, where are you exactly a Boygate? If you find Boygate in your life, where exactly do you feel that your relation with God was treacherous? Kibanu Doifi should be easy. Every shtus that you said Pshat Natashis is Doifi, so there's no problem on that one. Okay? But I'm not joking. He'avinu, what have you misconstrued? Everything. Okay? What have you misconstrued? Well, there's a world out there. Have you lived a misconstrued life? Have you given Pshat to reality which is not there? Have you lived a life which is totally misconstrued? You have created imagery which is misconstrued reality. In light of everything we spoke about today, hey, yeah, that should be a heavy one. Now make your list. What are products of me doing that? Everything. You may end up having War and Peace. Not just one little list that they give out in the name of the Chayodam. You'll have a Gesundte, you know what I mean, like Boabasim at the Rif. Chavrusa style with 6 volumes, you know. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. So you understand the obsession of the Nedarim? Because this is the time of the year which the job is to ask man not what you did, but what makes you tick. To what extent are you thinking? To what extent are you living life by the values of Malchus Shemayim? It's the yoyib of machshava, not of bri of maisa. You want to be mechash the taiva of a kashboch to shiel of dira betachtonim. God wants a residence in this world. To what extent have you created it? And it's only created by Havayu Elokim. So the mashal in Teshuva is Nedarim. Nedarim is a vivid reality which we experience it, yes, that words are meaningless if they don't express me in it. And if I'm Moshe Mordai, I say now, I will not be in those words, and those words are devoid of me. Those words are meaningless. That's what Messias, that's what Kol Nidra is saying. And when you're actually looking at God and you're saying, listen, all those things, those words that I said, they weren't me. I have a different relationship with you. I'm in a different plane. And they also should be annulled. It's one mashal of halacha that we touch upon because that is the core of what Teshuva is. The mishra is where's your head? To what extent is your mind and your actions? The mind of Ratzon Hashem and of Kavod Shemayim. HaTorah and Nedarim is exactly based on that principle. This is a Rav Blachman, this is Yishurim. I think it's Shara Zrizus, if I'm not mistaken, where he says this. One of those prakim in the beginning. Now you understand the obsession of Nedarim. Yeah, it's a big thing. First, ben chulim b'tayris hakodesh. Gemara says in Bava Basra, says the halach is like this: if you go into the market and you pick up stuff and you want to eat vegetables, and then you decide, no, I'm not going to buy it. You picked up your bottom, I'm not going to buy it. So okay, so put it back. But if you're Yerushalayim, then you should take it, be mafresh maestris, and then you want to give it back, you give it back. Rambam brings it la'alach. For a moment. Yeah. Peches Amar Aleph. Daf learning Gemara. Tanu Rabbana. Halakeach yerek min hashuk ubirer veiniach afilu kol yom kulo lo yikona. You know, if you go to the market, I touch this, I touch that. Then I was going to buy. I'm not going to. As long as you didn't decide, for let this chayv ma'asus. Gomer belibay liknoisay kana. V'nischayev b'maiser. Lachzira yefsha shekvar nischayev b'maiser. La'asra yefsha shekvar mafchisim b'damim. Ketzad ma'asray v'noisneit me'amaiser. Fed the Gemara oto mishum the gomer belibay liknois kana. Where'd you hear a thing like this? Gomer belibay liknois shir kana. So the Gemara, yes. Ha ketzad. So the Amar Rabbeishia, Hoche b'yira shamayim askina. We're talking about a person which the Gemara defines as a yarei shamayim. In other words, anything less, chaim sheyesh b'm yira shamayim, means this. What's the yira shamayim? Kigoin, what's an example of a yira shamayim? Rav Safra. The kiyim b'nafshei v'dever emes bilvavai. What does this mean? What does this mean? So it's a Gemara in Makos. Everybody learned Makos. Gemara at the end of Makos, where the Gemara tells the story of Rav Safra. But this is Batan Allah and Ramba. If you're Yerushalayim, you are kind of a machshava, and then you actually have to do what? You have to be mafresh maestris, and if you want to give it back, you mafresh dummy. You use money on the deal. That's the Allah. Where's the Gemara in Makos? The Gemara in Makos of Chavdalit. So the Gemara discusses there different levels of what's the core precepts of Judaism. And different generations had different cores. And here the Gemara says, on the mizmor that people say, Mizmor David, Mi Yagur Ba'alechem Yishkem Bahar Kodshecha Hayil Tamim Upayil Tzadik V'Dever Emes Bilvavai. What's meant for Dever Emes Bilvavai? So the Gemara Kigain Rav Safra. That's Rashi. What's meant Kigain Rav Safra? He brings a Shiltas Reb Achoy and Vayechi Shilta Lamed Vav. The Gemara Rashi Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph and Makos. V'achi Hava Uvda. Here he tells a story. He had something which he wanted to sell. When a person came and wanted to buy it, and why it was Bishash Kriyas Shema. Now here's something beautiful. Safra's Kriyas Shema. He doesn't make this faces. No one knows he's been Kriyas Shema. Isn't it unbelievable? Isn't it beautiful? No one notices being Kriyas Shema. He doesn't scream Shema. No. He's in the middle of Kriya Shema and no one knows. And what happens, the guy sees the guy sitting over there. He says, Omalei, ten li achefes, bekach v'kach damim. V'loi ono, if they show you Kriya Shema. And this guy didn't notice. It's so niflamoid of the tznius of how to be no one has to know. You're avoided with the Kadosh Baruch Hu is supposed to be yours. It's not supposed to be advertised. Kasavar Zeh, this person thought he's not answered to me. Why? He doesn't like the price. He says, hey Safra, I'm going to buy the car, 10,000. And he's not answering. So what does he do? 15,000, give me the car. Rav Safra heard this all. See, it's also interesting. He's Kriyas Shema, but he knows what people talk to him. But he's not going to answer because he doesn't say and all the other things. No. Doesn't do anything. Now I'm talking to God. I heard you. I think you said he talks to God and he hears people, but I will relate only to God. I'm focused. When I finish, I will talk to you. And no one knows he's talking to God. I love the picture. It says, so steht weiter, La'achesh yisiyam Kriyas Shema, Omaloi, Tula chefetz bedamim. Take it with the original price. Because I was Gomer Das when I heard it on that price. That's called V'dever Emes B'Vava. What do you mean? So what? State da you said in the Gemara Barabasha that just like the din is Amira L'Gavaya Kimisir L'Hedyer Dami, and you're maknit to hegdish b'machshava, you don't even need dibra, machshava is enough. For Rav Safra lived as if he was hegdish, and when he was Gomer Das, that was a kinyan. Because the Gemara says in Barabashi, is koine b'machshava. It's not just I decided to keep the price I thought about. The Lashon of the Gemara in Barabashi is koine b'machshava. Kegain Rav Safra. State in Mordechai, in Kiddushin, I'm going to say this about Pekah, it's late already. Maharsha brings it here. He says, because this is the derech of K'toshim v'Tahirim, of the Tanoim, that everything they do, they relate to it as Hegdish. I'm going to explain that in 2 minutes. And just like Hegdish is b'machshava, everything for them, Dibur is not what counts. For them, what counts is machshava. Understand, in light of what we're saying, what it says over here. For them, every word is only meaningful to the extent that it expresses a thought. And since the core of speech is thought, since in the transcendency of Hegdish does not demand expression as long as the core of what's is there. I live in a sphere of the world of thought. Words are small for me. Everything to me is like Hegdish. Zok the Mordechai, and this is the reason that Chassidim are Rishonim Ochlu to Chulayim B'Tairis HaKodesh. Because for them, everything was like Kodesh. Meaning to say, Tumah is obviously spiritually something not positive. The only thing is, if you live an external life, Chulin is not holy, so we shouldn't be that sensitive. But if you see Dvar Hashem in everything, and you see Kvodi Yisbarach in everything, so you should be sensitive to Torah in everything. And that's the idea of Chulin B'Tairis HaKodesh. You must live the world of machshava, not the world of dibur. You must live with the primary thought. Where does it come from? This is all Ratzon and Kvoda Yisborach expressed in a piece of a tomato. That's Hegdish. So steht Mefusha Mordechai, the end of the first parak of Kedushin, quoted in the Maharsha over there in Daf Chav Daled and Makos. Chulin B'Taras HaKodesh, and the idea of living a world in which words are only important. Because Nebuchadnezzar can't understand you, but reality of the words is because of the thought behind it. I always go to core reality. The external expression is not what counts. I live in core reality. What's important is what does it mean, not what was said. Not what is this, what does it mean, where is it coming from, what's it about? Not just putting on tefillin, what does it mean, and what is the relationship, and what does God want from me? I'll tell you what he wants with tefillin. The Shabbat is Samayich v'Salev. The Gemara says this. That's what he wants in tefillin. He wants you to be Mishabbat Samayich v'Salev. How? Through tefillin. So what do? We put on tefillin without even thinking about Shibud HaMayich v'Alev. That's anti-Rav Safra. That's anti-Asher Shemei Teshuva. If you want something like Chulin B'Taras HaKodesh, you want to be mocked on something, do things and think about what for. At least for these few days, say the Yiratzim before tefillin to understand why you're putting on tefillin. And this is what you should be doing in all your mitzvahs. That's not frumkeit. That's living in another plane. Trying to experience life through core, not through symptom. That's your Chulin B'Taras HaKodesh. That's why it's important. As to why the 10 days, it's really late, and I said 2 hours and not more, so some other time. Bye. It's another half hour. We will have it. Slichas tomorrow at 6:20.